The invitation the war had lasted for 47 cycles, and nobody could remember why it started anymore. High Arbiter Nixomi floated in her water-filled chamber and stared at the holographic display before her. 3 factions had torn the galaxy apart for decades. The Valkyrie swarm with their insectoid warriors, the Suri Federation with their proud avian fleets, and the Nyx Collective with their aquatic mines and deep space stations. Millions had died, and countless worlds had burned, and still no side could claim victory. But today, everything would change. Today, the leaders of all 3 factions would gather on Harmony's Reach, a neutral station built specifically for this moment. Today, they would finally discuss peace. Nexomi pressed a tendril against the communication panel and opened a channel to her aide. As the final delegation confirmed their arrival, she asked. "Yes, High Arbiter," the aide responded nervously. "The humans will arrive within the hour." Humans. Nixomi felt a chill run through her liquid body. She had reviewed the files on this strange new species 100 times. They had been discovered only 3 cycles ago on the far edge of the galaxy. A young species that had barely achieved faster than light travel. The Council had decided to invite them as neutral observers since they had no history with any of the warring factions. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but the more Nixomi learned about humans, the more uneasy she became. Their homeworld was a nightmare. Earth, they called it. A planet with extreme temperature variations, constant seismic activity, and predators in every environment. The gravity alone was enough to crush most Council species. And yet humans thrived there. The files called them Deathworlders, and the name fit perfectly. In the reception hall, Councillor Velfrix clicked his mandibles together in a nervous rhythm. The insectoid diplomat had fought against the Suri Federation for most of his adult life. He had seen terrible things in battle, but nothing frightened him quite like the data packet he held in his 4 hands. "They consume poison for pleasure," he muttered to himself. "Caffeine, alcohol, capsaicin. Substances that would kill any of us." Ambassador Sorol ruffled her feathers and tried to appear calm. The avian diplomat stood nearly 2 meters tall, with brilliant blue plumage that marked her high status. She had negotiated with enemies and faced death threats without flinching. But these humans made her deeply uncomfortable. "I have read that they are persistence predators," she said quietly. "They do not chase their prey with speed. They simply follow it until it collapses from exhaustion. They can run for days without stopping." Velfrix made a sound of distress. "And they heal from injuries that would kill any other species. Broken bones, damaged organs, severed limbs. They simply repair themselves and continue. The most disturbing part," Sorrel added, "is that they display their teeth when happy. On my world, showing teeth is a threat, a promise of violence. But humans do this to show friendship." Nexomi entered the reception hall and noticed the tension immediately. Representatives from all 3 factions stood as far apart as possible, maintaining their usual hostility. But she also noticed something new. They kept glancing toward the docking bay doors. They kept whispering about the humans. "Fellow council members," Nixomi announced, "let us remember why we are here. We are here to end a war that has caused unimaginable suffering. The human delegation is here only to observe. They pose no threat to our proceedings." She wished she believed her own words. A soft chime echoed through the hall. The human ship had docked. Every eye, every optical sensor, every sensory organ in the room turned toward the docking bay doors. Guards gripped their weapons tighter. Diplomats took involuntary steps backward. Even Nixomi felt her heart beat faster. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss. 3 figures stepped through. The first was a male human of average height with black hair cut short and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decoration. This was Captain Yoon Seo-jun, leader of the human delegation. Behind him came a female human with long dark hair tied back neatly. She carried a datapad, and her eyes sparkled with obvious curiosity as she looked around the hall. This was Dr. Park Min-ah, their xenolinguist. The third human made several council members gasp. Lieutenant Kang Dae-ho stood nearly 2 meters tall, with shoulders as wide as a doorway. His muscles strained against his uniform, and his footsteps seemed to shake the floor. He was clearly their security officer. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The humans looked around at the gathered aliens with expressions of wonder and excitement. They seemed genuinely happy to be here. Then Captain Yoon did something that would haunt the council members for days. He smiled, his lips pulled back to reveal 2 rows of white teeth. Perfect predator teeth designed for tearing flesh. And he aimed this terrifying display directly at High Arbiter Nixomi. Several guards nearly opened fire. Councillor Velthrix felt his legs go weak. Ambassador Sorol's feathers stood straight up in alarm. Nixomi had to remind herself that this was a greeting, not a threat. High Arbiter Nixomi, Captain Yoon said in a warm voice. Thank you so much for inviting us. Humanity is honored to witness this historic moment. We hope our presence can contribute to lasting peace among your great civilizations. He extended his hand toward her with his palm facing up. Ningzum stared at the offered limb. On most worlds, showing an open palm meant one thing. Look at my weapon. Look at what I could do to you. It was a display of dominance, a subtle threat. She forced herself to remain calm. Welcome to Harmony's Reach, Captain Yoon, she managed to say. We are pleased to have humanity join us as observers. Behind her, Velthrix leaned toward Sorol. Did you see those teeth? He whispered. They could tear through metal. Sorol nodded slowly. We may have made a terrible mistake inviting them here. Neither of them noticed Dr. Park watching them with growing confusion. Neither of them saw Lieutenant Kang frown slightly at the fear in their eyes. The humans had no idea what was about to happen, and the galaxy would never be the same. First contact gone wrong. The welcome reception was a disaster from the very first moment. Captain Yoon walked through the grand hall with his hand still extended toward various council members. Each time he offered this gesture of friendship, the aliens recoiled as if he had pulled a weapon. He could not understand what he was doing wrong. Dara Park Meh stayed close to him and observed everything with careful attention. She noticed how the insectoid delegates trembled when Captain Yoon approached. She saw how the avian representatives fluffed their feathers in what appeared to be distress. Something was very wrong here, but she could not figure out what. Ambassador Sorol stood near a decorative fountain and tried to regain her composure. The human female was walking directly toward her. Those forward-facing eyes locked onto Sorol with intense focus. On her homeworld, such direct eye contact from a predator meant only one thing. You have been chosen as prey. Ambassador Sorol? Dea Park said warmly. I have read so much about the Suri Federation. Your culture is fascinating. And may I say, your feathers are absolutely beautiful. Sorol felt her blood run cold. The predator was complimenting her plumage. Was this how humans marked their targets? Did they admire their prey before striking? Thank you, Sorol managed to say in a strangled voice. Dea Park smiled brightly, showing her teeth, just like Captain Yoon had done. Sorol took 3 steps backward and nearly knocked over a serving drone. Meanwhile, Councillor Velthrix found himself cornered by Lieutenant Kang. The massive human had simply wanted to introduce himself, but his sheer size made escape impossible. Velthrix pressed his back against the wall and looked up at the towering figure. "It is wonderful to meet you, Counselor," Kang said in a deep but gentle voice. "I hope we can learn much from each other during this conference." "Yes," Velthrix squeaked. "Learn, yes. Of course." He made a mental note to increase security around the human quarters. A being that large could probably tear through walls. The reception continued with mounting tension. Servants brought out trays of carefully prepared food from dozens of worlds. The council had researched human dietary requirements and prepared dishes they believed would be acceptable. Captain Yoon picked up something that looked like a small purple fruit. He bit into it and his face immediately turned red. Tears formed in his eyes. He coughed twice and then took another bite. "This is wonderful!" he exclaimed. "What is this called?" The servant who had offered the dish stared in horror. That fruit contained concentrated acidic compounds that would burn through the stomach lining of most species. It was meant as a decoration, not as food. "That is Vexal fruit," the servant stammered. "It is extremely dangerous to consume." Captain Yoon looked at the half-eaten fruit in his hand. "Really? It just tastes spicy to me." "Very delicious." He finished it and reached for another. News of this incident spread through the reception hall like fire. The humans could eat poison. They consumed toxic substances and called them delicious. What else could these monsters survive? Dare Park noticed the beverage station and poured herself something that looked like water. She took a sip and grimaced slightly. "Is this alcoholic?" she asked a nearby server. "No," the server replied nervously. "That is fermented mineral water. It contains trace amounts of heavy metals that most species find refreshing." "Heavy metals?" Dare Park laughed. "Oh, that explains the taste. It is a bit like our mineral water back on Earth, just stronger." She continued drinking it. The server backed away slowly and immediately reported this to security. Lieutenant Kang found his way to a corner where he could observe the room. The air on this station was different from Earth. Something in the filtration system irritated his nose. He felt a tickle building and tried to suppress it, but failed. He sneezed. The sound was explosive. A sharp burst of air that echoed off the walls like a gunshot. Every alien in the room froze. Guards drew their weapons and aimed at Kang. Several diplomats dove behind furniture. Kang looked around in confusion. "I am so sorry," he said quickly. "I just sneezed. The air here is a little different from what I am used to." Captain Yoon rushed to his side. "Is everything all right? Why are the guards pointing weapons at us?" High Arbiter Nixomi raised a tendril and ordered the guards to stand down. Her hearts were pounding. That sound had registered on their security systems as a Level 3 threat vocalization. The kind of sound a predator made before attacking. "It is nothing," she said, though her voice wavered. "Please, let us continue with the reception." The meal service continued, but nobody could relax. Captain Yoon tried to make conversation about Earth and its seasons. He mentioned casually that temperatures could swing from -40 degrees to +50 degrees throughout the year. Councillor Velthrix excused himself immediately and went to a private room to process this information. A species that survived such extreme temperature variations. That was impossible. No living thing should be able to adapt to such conditions. Ambassador Suro listened to Dr. Park describe something called winter, where water fell from the sky as frozen crystals and covered everything in white. On our homeworld, such conditions would mean instant death. But humans apparently built shelters and continued their daily lives as if nothing was wrong. By the end of the reception, the three warring factions had forgotten their hostility toward each other. They had found a common ground at last, but not the kind anyone expected. They were all terrified of the humans. High Arbiter Nixomi called an emergency session in her private chambers. Leaders from all three factions attended. For the first time in 47 cycles, enemies sat side by side without threats or insults. "We need to discuss the human situation," Nixomi said grimly. "I believe we have made a serious error in inviting them here." Councillor Velthrix nodded rapidly. "They are monsters. Did you see what they ate? Did you hear that threat sound the big one made?" Ambassador Surl spread her wings in agreement. "The female one targeted me specifically. She complimented my feathers and made direct eye contact. I believe she was assessing me as potential prey." "We must decide what to do," Nixomi said. "These humans cannot be allowed to roam freely on this station. They are too dangerous." For the first time in decades, the three factions agreed on something. The humans had to be contained. The misunderstanding escalates. The morning after the reception brought no relief to the council members. If anything, their fear had grown stronger overnight. Reports flooded in from every section of Harmony's reach. The humans were everywhere, and everything they did seemed designed to terrify. Lieutenant Kang had found the station gymnasium early in the morning. He had spent an hour lifting weights and running on equipment designed for multiple species. The security footage showed him casually lifting 300 kilograms without assistance. He performed exercises that would require powered exoskeletons for any council species. And when he finished, he was barely breathing hard. "He is a weapon," Councillor Velthrix said as he watched the footage for the 5th time. "A biological weapon in human form. Look at those muscles. He could tear any of us apart with his bare hands." Ambassador Surl stood beside him with her feathers pressed flat against her body in distress. "And the other two are probably just as dangerous. They simply hide it better." In another part of the station, Dr. Park had spent the morning visiting different cultural exhibits. She asked countless questions about history and customs and language. She took notes on everything and smiled warmly at everyone she met. To the council species, this behavior was deeply suspicious. Why would anyone gather so much information unless they were planning something? Clearly, the humans were conducting reconnaissance. They were learning weaknesses and vulnerabilities. This had to be preparation for some kind of attack. She asked about our breeding cycles, a Valkyrie official reported nervously. "And our population numbers. And the locations of our major colonies." "Intelligence gathering," Velthrix confirmed. "They are planning an invasion. I am certain of it." Captain Yoon had requested a tour of the station's command center. He expressed genuine interest in how different species work together to maintain such a complex facility. He complimented the engineering and asked thoughtful questions about the technology. The station commander interpreted this as the human leader assessing their defenses. Clearly, Captain Yoon wanted to know where the weak points were. He wanted to understand how to disable the station if necessary. By midday, the council factions had held 3 secret meetings without the humans present. Former enemies now whispered together in corners. Species that had killed each other's citizens for decades now shared worried glances across the hall. The war that had divided them seemed unimportant compared to this new threat. "We must present a united front," High Arbiter Nixomi declared. "Whatever our past differences, we cannot allow these humans to divide and conquer us." Everyone agreed. The humans, meanwhile, had no idea any of this was happening. Captain Yoon sat in his quarters and reviewed his notes for the peace conference. He genuinely wanted to help. He believed that humanity's fresh perspective might offer solutions the warring factions had not considered. "Something is wrong," Dr. Park said as she entered his quarters. "Have you noticed how everyone reacts to us? They seem frightened." Captain Yoon nodded slowly. "I thought it was just cultural differences. Different species have different customs." "But you are right. It seems like more than that. I have been researching their body language, Dr. Park continued. I think they might be misinterpreting our behavior. When you smile, they see a threat display. When I make eye contact, they think I'm hunting them. Everything we do seems to terrify them. Before Captain Yoon could respond, an alarm blared through the station. Lieutenant Kang burst into the room. Captain, there has been an accident in Section 7. A door malfunction has trapped someone. They ran. The humans moved through the corridors faster than anyone expected. Their bodies were built for running, for chasing, for covering ground quickly. Council members pressed themselves against walls as the three humans sprinted past. The sight of predators running at full speed triggered ancient survival instincts in dozens of species. They reached Section 7 in minutes. A crowd had gathered around a jammed door. Behind a thick metal, a small creature was crying for help. It was a Minari, one of the smallest species on the station. Barely half a meter tall, with soft fur and large, frightened eyes. The mechanism is broken, a technician explained. We need to wait for maintenance drones to cut through. It could take an hour. An hour? Lieutenant Kang pushed forward. The air in there could run out. We cannot wait that long. He examined the door and found a small gap where the metal had warped. Without hesitation, he grabbed the edge with his bare hands and pulled. The crowd gasped. Kang gritted his teeth and growled with effort. His muscles bulged against his uniform. The metal creaked and groaned. Slowly, impossibly, the door began to bend. Kang adjusted his grip and pulled harder. The gap widened inch by inch. Come on, he grunted. Just a little more. With a final tremendous effort, he tore the door open wide enough for the trapped Minari to escape. The small creature stumbled out, shaking with fear. Kang immediately dropped to one knee to bring himself closer to the little being's level. Are you hurt? He asked gently. Are you okay? I am sorry if I scared you. The Minari stared up at him with huge eyes. This giant predator, who had just torn through metal with his bare hands, was now speaking softly and checking for injuries. The creature did not know how to process this. I am okay, the Minari whispered. Thank you. Kang smiled warmly. Good. You were very brave in there. What is your name? Tilla, the small creature replied. Nice to meet you, Tila. I am Kang. If you ever need help again, you can always find me, okay? The crowd watched this interaction in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a human tear through metal that should have required industrial equipment. And now that same human was being gentle with the smallest and weakest creature on the station. None of them understood. Behind the crowd, Councilor Velthrix recorded everything on his personal device. Evidence, he muttered. Proof of what they can do. The council must see this. That evening, the council called for a secret vote. The question was simple. Should the human delegation be confined to their quarters for the safety of everyone on the station? Captain Yoon learned of the vote through a sympathetic aide who disagreed with the council's paranoia. He sat in his quarters with Dr. Park and Lieutenant Kang and tried to understand what had gone so wrong. They want to lock us up, he said quietly. They think we are dangerous. They think we came here to hurt them. Dr. Park shook her head sadly. Everything we do frightens them. Our strength, our endurance, our diet, even our smiles. They see monsters when they look at us. Then we need to show them the truth, Captain Yoon decided. We need to show them who we really are. He stood and straightened his uniform. I am going to request permission to address the council, he announced. Before they vote. If they are going to judge humanity, they should at least hear our side. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. The truth revealed, the council chamber fell silent as Captain Yoon entered. Every seat was filled. Representatives from all three factions sat together, united for the first time in decades by their shared fear of humanity. High Arbiter Nixomi floated in her elevated position at the center. Councillor Velthrix and Ambassador Sorrel sat in the front row with identical expressions of wariness. Captain Yoon walked to the speaking platform alone. The Park and Lieutenant Kang waited outside, watching through a viewing screen. The captain had insisted on facing the council by himself. He did not want to intimidate them with numbers. High Arbiter, Captain Yoon began with a respectful bow. Council members, thank you for allowing me to speak. I understand that there will be a vote regarding my delegation. I understand that many of you are afraid of us. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others glared at him with open hostility. I want to show you something, Captain Yoon continued. Not to threaten you, not to prove how dangerous we are, but to show you who we really are. He activated a holographic display, and images began to appear in the air above him. The first image showed a human family adopting a wounded animal. The creature was clearly not of their species, not even close. It had scales and too many legs and looked nothing like a human. But the family held it gently and fed it and gave it a name. We bond with other species, Captain Yoon explained. We cannot help ourselves. We see something alive and we want to protect it. We want to care for it. This is not strategy. This is simply who we are. More images appeared. Humans building shelters for strangers after disasters. Humans running into burning buildings to save people they had never met. Humans giving food and water to enemies on battlefields. We evolved as predators, Captain Yoon admitted. Yes, we have teeth designed for meat. Yes, we can chase prey until it collapses. Yes, we survive injuries that would kill others. All of this is true, but it does not define us. The images shifted to show humans crying. A human weeping over a dead pet. A human sobbing at a sad story. A human moved to tears by a beautiful piece of music. We feel deeply, Captain Yoon said softly. We cry when we are sad. We cry when we are happy. We cry when we see beauty or kindness or sacrifice. Our hearts break easily despite our strong bodies. Councillor Velthrix watched with growing confusion. These images did not match the monsters he had imagined. These creatures showed genuine emotion, genuine care, genuine love for beings completely different from themselves. Ambassador Sorrel leaned forward in her seat. The human on the screen was feeding a small bird by hand. The bird was clearly not afraid. It sat comfortably in the human's palm and ate without hesitation. How could a prey species be so calm around a predator? Your files tell you that we display our teeth when happy, Captain Yoon continued. This is true. We call it smiling. It is how we show joy and friendship and welcome. I know that on many of your worlds, showing teeth means threat. But for us, it means the opposite. It means we are happy to see you. He paused and looked directly at the council members. You invited us here as neutral observers because we have no history with your factions. We came because we wanted to help. We wanted to witness peace being made. We wanted to believe that even species who have fought for decades can find common ground. Dare Park had been allowed to enter, and now she stepped forward to join Captain Yoon. I have spent my life studying other cultures, she said. I ask questions because I want to understand, not because I want to exploit. Every species I meet teaches me something new about the universe. You are not prey to me. You are wonders. Lieutenant Kang entered next. His massive form drew worried looks, but he moved slowly and kept his hands visible. I know I look frightening, he admitted. I am large and strong, and I just tore a door apart with my bare hands. But do you know what I am actually afraid of? He paused and looked almost embarrassed. Insects, he confessed. Small crawling things with too many legs. They terrify me. I know it makes no sense. I could crush them with one finger, but something about them makes me want to run away. Several insectoid delegates exchanged confused looks. This giant predator was afraid of creatures smaller than their children. When I saved Kella today, Kang continued, my first thought was not about my own strength. My first thought was hoping I had not scared her. I wanted to make sure she was okay. I wanted to comfort her. A small voice spoke up from the crowd. It was Tella, the Minari that Kang had rescued. The tiny creature had somehow entered the chamber and now stood on a seat to be seen. He was gentle, Tella said in her quiet voice. The human was so gentle. He spoke softly, and he apologized for scaring me, and he asked my name. He could have crushed me, but instead he wanted to be my friend. The chamber went very still. High Arbiter Nixomi stared at the humans with new eyes. She had spent days fearing them, imagining all the terrible things they could do. But she had never considered what they chose not to do. She had never thought about the restraint they showed every moment of every day. Councillor Velthrix rose slowly to his feet. His mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated deep thought. If you are this powerful, he asked quietly, why would you choose to be kind? What do you gain from gentleness? Why not simply take what you want? Captain Yoon smiled sadly. Because we know what it feels like to be afraid. We know what it feels like to be small and alone in a dangerous universe. Our world is full of threats. We evolved surrounded by predators and disasters and death. Every human alive carries the memory of that fear in their hearts. He stepped closer to the council, close enough that they could see the sincerity in his eyes. We choose kindness because we do not want anyone else to feel that fear. We choose peace because we know the cost of war. We choose to protect the weak because we remember when we were weak. Darpark added gently, we did not come here to conquer. We came here because you asked for help making peace. And where we come from, that means something sacred. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Searle stood. Her feathers settled into a pattern that indicated respect. I believe them, she said. I do not fully understand them yet, but I believe they mean us no harm. One by one, other delegates rose to show their agreement. The vote to confine the humans was cancelled. A new understanding had begun. A new understanding. The peace conference resumed the next morning with a completely different atmosphere. For 47 cycles, the three factions had sat across from each other with hatred in their hearts. They had argued and threatened and refused to compromise. Every session had ended in deadlock. Every proposal had been rejected. But something had changed overnight. High Arbiter Nixomi watched in amazement as counselor. Velthrix actually listened to Ambassador Searle's proposal without interrupting. The insectoid delegate nodded thoughtfully and asked clarifying questions instead of launching accusations. The avian ambassador responded with patience instead of anger. What is happening? Nixomi whispered to her aide. The aide smiled nervously. I believe they have found common ground, High Arbiter. Their shared experience with the humans seems to have shown them that cooperation is possible. It was true. Species that had spent decades killing each other had spent the previous night united by their fear of humanity. They had talked and planned and worked together. And in doing so, they had accidentally discovered that their enemies were not so different after all. Captain Yoon sat in the observer section with his team and watched the negotiations with quiet hope. He did not speak unless asked. He did not try to influence the outcome. But his presence served as a constant reminder of what was possible when different species chose understanding over fear. By midday, the first major breakthrough occurred. The Valkyrie swarm agreed to withdraw from 3 disputed systems in exchange for mining rights in another region. The Suri Federation accepted these terms and offered additional trade concessions. The Nix Collective proposed a joint patrol system to prevent future conflicts. Agreements that had seemed impossible just days ago now flowed freely. During a break in the negotiations, Councillor Velthrix approached Captain Yoon. The insectoid delegate moved hesitantly, still not entirely comfortable around humans. But he forced himself to speak. "Captain Yoon," he said carefully, "I owe you an apology. I judged your species based on fear and incomplete information. I assumed the worst when I should have sought to understand." Captain Yoon shook his head gently. "No apology is necessary, Counselor. Fear is natural. Your species evolved to recognize threats and protect yourselves. There is no shame in that. What matters is what you do when you learn the truth." Velthrix considered this for a moment. "On my world, we have a saying, 'The warrior who never fights has won 1,000 battles.' I think I understand it better now." "We have something similar on Earth," Captain Yoon replied. "The greatest victory is the one achieved without violence." They stood together in comfortable silence, two beings from vastly different worlds finding common understanding. Across the room, Dr. Park was deep in conversation with a group of young delegates from all three factions. They gathered around her with notebooks and recording devices, eager to learn about humanity. "Tell us about your pack bonds," a young Suri asked. "How do you form connections with other species?" Dr. Park laughed warmly. "We bond with almost anything. On Earth, we have formed partnerships with wolves that evolved into dogs over thousands of generations. We keep creatures that could kill us as beloved pets. We name our vehicles and talk to our plants and cry when our robots stop working." "You cry over robots?" a Valkyrie youth asked in disbelief. "Oh yes," Dr. Park confirmed. "There was a small robot named Opportunity that explored another planet in our solar system. It was designed to operate for 90 days, but it kept going for 15 years. When it finally stopped working, millions of humans mourned. People wrote poems and songs about it. Children made artwork in its honor." The young delegates exchanged amazed glances. A species that could grow emotionally attached to a machine, that could mourn something that had never been alive? These humans were far stranger than anyone had imagined, but in a wonderful way. Lieutenant Kang had found his own unexpected role on the station. Since his rescue of Tyla, word had spread among the smaller species. They began seeking him out, drawn by the contradiction of his terrifying appearance and gentle nature. He now walked through the corridors with a small crowd of tiny beings trailing behind him. Minari and other small species perched on his shoulders and hung from his arms. They asked him questions about Earth and listened with wide eyes to his stories. "Is it true that human children keep predators in their sleeping chambers?" a small voice asked. Kang smiled down at the curious creature. "We call them pets. Dogs, cats, sometimes even snakes and spiders. They sleep in our beds and eat from our hands, and we love them with all our hearts. Are you not afraid they will hurt you?" "Sometimes they do," Kang admitted. "But we forgive them because they are family. Love is worth the risk." The negotiations continued for 3 more weeks. The humans were no longer just observers. The three factions began actively seeking their input, valuing humanity's fresh perspective on problems that had seemed unsolvable. Captain Yoon suggested compromise solutions that neither side had considered. Dr. Park helped bridge communication gaps between species. Lieutenant Kang somehow became the unofficial peacekeeper, his mere presence reminding everyone that there were bigger things to fear than old enemies. Finally, on the 23rd day, the treaty was complete. High Arbiter Nix Olmi called for the official signing ceremony. Representatives from all factions gathered in the Great Hall. The document represented the most comprehensive peace agreement in galactic history. Trade routes would reopen. Prisoners would be released. Borders would be redrawn with fairness. Before we sign, Nixolmi announced, I wish to recognize the role that our human guests have played in these proceedings. They came as neutral observers, but they became so much more. Their presence taught us that understanding is possible between the most different of beings. Their kindness showed us that strength and gentleness can exist together. She turned to Captain Yoon. Captain, humanity has earned a permanent seat on this council. If you will have us. Captain Yoon stood slowly, overwhelmed by the honor. Behind him, Dr. Park wiped tears from her eyes. Lieutenant Kang beamed with pride. Aye, Arbiter, Captain Yoon replied. Humanity accepts with gratitude and humility. We promise to bring to this council the same spirit of hope and cooperation that brought us here. We will stand with you against any threat. We will work beside you toward any goal. We will be your partners and your friends. The treaty was signed. The war that had lasted 47 cycles ended with a stroke of a pen. Months later, historians would give the agreement a special name. They called it the Human Accord, in honor of the strange Death Worlders who had accidentally terrified the galaxy into peace. Coffee became a regulated substance after several council species became hopelessly addicted. Human handshakes evolved into a galactic symbol of trust. And Lieutenant Kang formally adopted Tilla as his honorary little sister, carrying her on his shoulder to every official function. On the anniversary of the signing, Captain Yoon stood in a viewing window and looked out at the stars. The station bustled with activity behind him. Species that had once been enemies now laughed and worked together. The galaxy was healing. Dr. Park joined him at the window. We came here expecting to observe history, she said softly. Instead, we helped make it. Captain Yoon nodded. We showed them who we are. The good and the frightening, the strong and the gentle. And they chose to see the best in us. Do you think it will last? Captain Yoon smiled, and this time nobody in the galaxy would have flinched. I think it will, he said, because now they know the truth about humanity. We are not monsters. We are just a species that learned to be kind in a universe that gave us every reason not to be. Outside the window, the stars burned on in endless silence. But they seemed a little less cold now, a little less lonely, because humanity had arrived, and they had brought hope with them.